everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be taking you through my 2023 reading bullet journal setup. So I'm going to be taking you through step by step of every spread that I do in my reading journal so that you can see the kinds of things that I keep track of when I read throughout the year, and hopefully that will give you some inspiration for your own reading journal this year. And I'm also going to be showing you some of these spreads that I've done previously so that you can see what they look like when they get filled out. But I'm also going to be doing a lot of new spreads this year that I'm really excited about. I really love keeping statistics about my reading, and especially at the end of the year, going back and looking at all my statistics and just seeing what kind of reader I was that year, and even going back and comparing different years against each other and seeing how my reading has evolved. So whether you're looking for inspiration for your own reading journal spreads this year, or you're just curious about what my reading journal looks like, stick around. I think that you're going to enjoy this. So this will be my 4th year of doing a reading bullet journal, and I always use the Origami vegan leather A5 notebooks. They are really high quality and I definitely recommend them. I wanted to show you some spreads from my previous reading journals so you can get an idea of my style and how I use my reading bullet journal. So right now we're looking at my journal from 2020, which was the first year I ever did a reading journal. I made these really cool spreads for the books I read and intended to go back and copy my Goodreads review into the space, but never ended up doing it for some reason. I do still enjoy how it turned out, and maybe one day I'll go back and add the reviews. I also added these stats at the end comparing my previous years of reading, and even made a few spreads of booktubers I enjoyed that year because 2020 was actually the year that I discovered booktube. So here's my 2021 reading journal, which I kept up with pretty well. 2021 was when I started keeping track of stats like reading every day for 30 minutes, how many pages I read a day, and how many hours per month I read. I also did things like my top physical TBR and the mid-year book freakout tag. I tried to simplify my spreads for each book I read compared to the previous year, hoping that would help me complete them more often, but as you can see, I filled out a few of them, but then never did for the others. Again, similar to 2020, I can still go back and add the reviews because they're all on my computer. Now, 2022 was a less successful year for my reading journal, and I think that's because it's the year I started booktube, so I was more focused on making content about the books I was reading than keeping up with the journal. I'm hoping to do better in 2023. So let's get started. As I said, I have only ever used the Origami A5 vegan notebook, and I really recommend them because the paper quality is very high. There is never any marker bleed through from the spreads I do, and I just love this pink color. I'll quickly go over the supplies that I use in case you're interested. Otherwise, you can use the timestamps below to skip forward to where I start making my spreads. For all my writing, I use these micron pens, which I enjoy a lot, and as you can see, there are different sizes to write bigger or smaller, which really comes in handy. I recently got this Tombow mechanical pencil, which I love because it uses this side piece to push out the lead. I also use these Tombow water-based markers. I haven't learned how to do calligraphy with them yet, so I really just use them to color stuff in for right now. I also recently got these alcohol-based Ohuhu, I think is how you say it, markers, which are awesome for coloring books. However, you do have to be careful with color bleed through with these ones. I got a huge pack of pastel ones and they are just so cute. I'd say the markers I use the most often in my journals are these zebra midliners. They don't bleed through at all and come in a bunch of nice colors. I would highly recommend these. I also do some stamping in my journal, so I have these pink, purple, and turquoise stamp pads. I have black too, which I actually use more than these fun colors, but these are nice to have. And here is my lettering and numbers stamp kit. Maybe you can tell that I only use the lowercase letters and numbers. I love the vintage look that these stamps give to my spreads. I use this little Staedtler 6-inch ruler, which is the perfect size for making charts and tables in the journal, as opposed to a full-length ruler. To attach paper inside the journal, I use this little scrapbooking dots roller thing. I have this beautiful scissor set, which I use to cut out papers and things that I add into my spreads, and having different sizes is nice depending on what I'm cutting out. And then of course I have washi tape. A lot of washi tape. Washi tape is a cute but very simple way to spice up your spreads. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. So I did already go through and prepare some of the decorative stuff I want to add into my spreads. I cut pictures and headers out so they're already ready to be glued in. I'm gonna have some super cute art cutouts throughout my whole journal, which all come from this amazing artist named Anna Lunak. This is definitely not sponsored, but I highly recommend that you check out her work. I'm a patron of hers on Patreon, and it's amazing because you have access to printable art, drawing guides, and she sends you a postcard and stickers of her work every month. Also, I love following her Instagram and her YouTube channel because it's so fun to see the behind the scenes of her art. Also, she lives in the mountains of Austria, so it's just absolutely beautiful to see the landscapes that she's inspired by. Also, she has an Etsy shop, which is where I got these sticker sheets from. They're so cute. Anyway, I just wanted to shout her out because all of the art you're going to see in the setup is from Anna Lunak, and you should 1000% go check out her work. I highly recommend it. It's adorable. So this first official spread is going to be my book tracker. My goal this year is to read 60 books, so each time I read one, I'll color in one of the little boxes. Again, how freaking cute is this art from Anna Lunak? I did go through before filming and penciled in my plans for what I want each spread to look like. I would highly recommend doing this step for everyone who's doing a bullet journal because it really helps cut down on making mistakes in pen. This is how I did the book tracker in previous journals, but I wanted to try something new this year. So you can see how useful this little ruler is when working with such a small piece of paper. I can see why people would just freehand this, but honestly, it doesn't take much more effort to just use the ruler, and I really like the crisp finished look it gives. For the stamp lettering, I use a particular method for getting the ink on the stamp because maybe you've seen people use these stamps and the stamps leave ink around the letter because the person pushed the stamp into the ink too hard. What I do to avoid this is I rub the stamp on the pad and do not press it at all. That way the ink is only on the letter and it makes a clean print onto the paper. After each spread is finished, I pass through with the eraser to erase all of my blueprinting sketches. I will do this for all the future spreads in this video, but I'm going to cut out the footage because I don't want you to get vertigo watching it. But I did want to point out that I do that important step every single time. So next is going to be my anticipated releases spread. Here I'm going to make little calendars and lists with all the books I'm looking forward to coming out this year. This is a great way to keep track of what's coming out when, because I love getting excited about new releases. You can see that I have a good few books for the beginning of the year already, and then I'll be adding to later months once they get announced. You can see that I'm adding a little box next to each title so that I can check off when I buy it. You can see here that despite my planning in pencil, I do still make mistakes, and so for those mistakes, I just use some whiteout and correct it. It's really important to not be too precious about your journal, otherwise it's not going to be as practical to be using. So here you can see I'm outlining the little pages so that they don't just blend in into the bigger side pages. Next is my 23 books I want to read in 2023 spread. So I cut out these little covers of the 23 books I want to read, and I'm just going to glue them into the boxes I've penciled in on the page. You can see that in 2021 I did a top 50 physical TBR, and in 2022 I did a 22 books I want to read in 2022. I'm trying a bit of a different style this year because I think it looks more crisp and clean. I've left room for me to put a star rating under the cover once I've read the book, and then I'll be able to have a nice overview at the end of the year of what I thought of these 23 books. The next spread is my best book per month bracket, where each month I'll put, you guessed it, the best book of the month, and then through the year they'll all face off to see what was the best book I read all year. I do make it a point to pair January with July and February with August, etc., rather than January with February and so on, because then it mixes up the year better later on in the tournament. Next is going to be a spread where I put the covers of all the books I read throughout the year. I'll still do spreads for each book further on in the journal, but this will be a nice one-glance spread to see them all. You can see the little horizontal rectangle, which is where I have planned to put the star rating for the book, similar to the 23 books I want to read in 2023 spread. So I've prepped 4 spreads for the covers of all the books that I'll read through the year. I have these 2 with the art on them, but I also have 2 more spreads without any art, which you'll see in the final flip through. Next is my spread where I keep track if I read 30 minutes every day. Reading 30 minutes every day has been a goal of mine for 3 years now, and it's something that really works for me, so I like to keep track of it because it's quite motivating to be able to mark if I accomplished it every day. You can see here how I've done this spread previously. It was just 1 page, but now I'm making a full 2-page spread this year. It's just really fun to be able to look at the whole year and see the patterns in my reading habits. For example, in that 2021 spread, I can see that I read the least over the summer. Next is a quite simple spread, but another fun visual at the end of the year, and that's how many books I read per month. Here you can see the final product from 2021 to give you an idea of how it will look once it's used. And just for information, if you're wondering, the markers that I use in the read 30 minutes per day spread and the how many books do I read per month spreads, I'm using the zebra midliner markers. Next is maybe a weird spread to have, but I love minute stats about my reading, so I keep track of how many hours I read a month. I achieve this by keeping track of how long I read every day, and I'll show you where and how I keep track of that in my monthly spread in a few minutes. So this one is just a horizontal bar chart that's filled out at the end of every month. Next is a similar spread to the previous one, and that's how many pages I read per month. I'm trying to focus more on how many pages I read rather than number of books, because I don't want to be discouraged from reading long books because it slows me down in my reading goal for the year. So on spreads like this, I can recognize that I did read a lot, even if it wasn't a lot of books. This is another horizontal bar graph that's filled out at the end of each month, and I use the data from the same monthly spread as I mentioned previously, which I'll get to in a minute. Now this is another spread that I'm going to use to help encourage me to pick up the long books I'm dying to read, and that's the pages per book spread. So this will work similarly to the books read per month spread, where for every book I read, I'll color in one box depending on the length of the book. Then at the end of the year, I'll be able to see, okay, I mostly read books ranging from 400 to 500 pages, for example. Next is a very similar spread to the previous one, but this time it's tracking the genres of books that I read. So it will be nice to see at a glance what is the division of genres that I read. Now obviously I already have a pretty good idea of the genres I read. I did make a list on the left from most likely to read to least likely to read, like literary fiction and thriller at the top because I'm most likely to read those, but I'm least likely to read poetry and children's literature, for example, so they're at the bottom. But I do think it will be interesting to reference at the end of the year. In previous years, I've tried to keep a digital spreadsheet of all the books I've hauled, but it has never worked out, so I'm hoping that if I keep track of it all with my other reading stats, I'll stick with it. So this first spread has space for 34 books, but I also left an empty spread on the next page to be able to add 36 more books, because I'm sure I'll need more than 34 spaces. So I have 3 columns for each book. The longest space will be for the title and author name of the book that I buy. The second largest space is for the date that I bought the book, and the little square will be for me to put a check when I actually read the book. It will be fun to see how many books I bought versus how many I end up reading. Okay, so now that all the overall yearly spreads are done, we can get into the beginning of the monthly spreads. So obviously, we'll start with January. I always start with a little intro page to each month just to divide up the journal and to be able to see how each month went. So again, I'm using this super cute art from Anna Lunak to decorate the January intro spread. I've got the wintry and cozy images since that's obviously the vibe for January. Here's an example of how I did the month intro pages in 2020. I do think this is cute with the torn book pages at the top and bottom especially, but it was so time consuming that I always put off doing it. I recommend doing something that's cute but doesn't take forever. So this is the monthly spread that I was referencing previously when I showed you the hours read per month and the pages read per month spreads. At the start of every month, I make a little table where I can keep track of how many pages and for how long I read every day. Here's an example of my monthly spread from October 2021. You can see that the horizontal graph shows the number of pages I read every day, and the little number at the end shows the time that I read each day. So I use that data to complete the hours read and the pages read per month spreads once the month is finished. And just for information, in case you're curious, the way that I keep track of that information is that I use the app Bookly. I actually use the paid version of this app because it keeps track of how long you read in a reading session and how many pages you read in that reading session. And it gives you all the stats about all your reading, so it's very easy for me to keep track of that information because it does all the work for me. And then I can just go into the app and copy those stats into my reading journal. So it makes it very easy. I would highly recommend this app, specifically the paid version of it. It's not that expensive. I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in those particular stats. Now that I've prepared all of my spreads, let's have one final flip through so you can see the final product. Alright guys, so that was my 2023 reading bullet journal setup. I hope to do some update videos throughout the year so that you can see how my spreads are evolving, and even if maybe I add something along the way so that you can be updated. And at the end of the year, I'm definitely going to do a flip through so that you can see literally everything that I did throughout the whole year. I would love to know what spreads that you do that I didn't add into my reading journal. I'm always looking for inspiration for new spreads to do in my journal. So if you do anything that you didn't see me put into my own journal, I would love for you to put that in the comments below just to give me some inspiration, and I'll probably add it to my own journal. If you enjoyed this video or if you found it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like, and subscribe if you haven't already so you won't miss those update videos that I do throughout the year, giving you an update on how my spreads are going. And of course, then you wouldn't miss my flip through at the end of the year as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye!